Hello, everybody. Hi, Chris and Cory. Thank you so much for joining us this week on this Sticky Notes chat. This particular week, we're going to be talking about counterintuitive practices. So we're going to be chatting about it. I'm Amanda Stockwell. That's Chris Notter and Cory Lebson, and we're three UX researchers talking about getting stuff done. But as always, we would like to have your questions, your feedback, and kind of any other things you would like to chat about. So feel free to shoot us a note either on the live stream, or you can always email us or tweet at us or any of those other things. Yeah, cool. All right, so first things first, counterintuitive practices. Chris, I believe you even went so far as to write a whole article about counterintuitive stuff that you've done. So tell me when we started talking about this topic, what does that mean to you?
So the article came about because I actually called it "Quit Whining." Start using some counterintuitive practices, and it's because I found that lots of folk in user experience are like, nobody ever listens to me on the team. I can't get people to come and watch my user research, and all these things that I realized, I kind of had those problems too, but when I got around them, I realized it was by doing something that wasn't what I normally would have decided to do. It was by doing something that was almost the opposite of what I thought I would do. I'll give you an example. So one of the things I found was that if you start testing the product itself, it's very unlikely that a team is going to listen to your findings because they've already built that product and they're already at the point where they want to release it. So it's much harder for you to justify to them that they need to make a change just because the users couldn't do something that they wanted, that they thought the users should be able to do, unless it's incredibly apparent that users can't do it. If you start testing when they're in the paper prototype phase, everybody's much more able to make changes. If you start testing when you're in an alpha or a beta release situation, there's still time to make changes. If you start testing when the code's already about to go live or gone live, very unlikely anything's going to happen to make a change. So that was one of the counterintuitive things. It's like, and it's okay. Now you talk about it, it's like, is it actually that counterintuitive? I don't know. But it's one of those things where it's like when I started at user research, we always used to test like finished products, I think, and it was one of the dumbest things we ever did, I think. So counterintuitive. Start doing things a different way. When you get these complaints about the team won't listen to me or whatever, turn it around, look at yourself, and see what could I do differently. So that's where it all came from.
All right, fair enough.
Just to counter the counterintuitive, I would say that I do see a lot of value often in doing finished products. Not the moment they're finished, but a year later when they're a finished product and they're like, oh, there's things wrong with this. Where do we go from here? And then I do finished products, and and then they're finished for a moment, and then they're not finished again, and then they're better. So.
Well, we could also have a debate about what finished means. We should probably table that for another time. But I think one of the things we should talk about too is to whom are things counterintuitive. So, because one of the things that I see sometimes happening is the things that are intuitive to me in my role are not necessarily intuitive to the rest of the team or other roles that I'm working with. So I'm curious if either of you have experience of that sort of dichotomy where what's intuitive to you or what you think makes kind of obvious sense is not counterintuitive to the team, or vice versa.
I mean, so I think I would start by saying that I guess what is intuitive to me is that I do the research and I deliver the results, and that people take the results and run with them and fix them and such. And my counterintuitive learning, through the years, through the decades, is that I need to let go of all that. So now my counterintuitive advice, is really forget people taking your recommendation. Like as a researcher anyway, forget people taking your recommendations. Forget thinking you can make a difference. Forget being the solutioner who fixes all the problems. and just do it and do your best and such. And that said, then I take that back to the product teams. I'm like, well, I'm here, I'll do the research, do with it what you want. And they're like, well, aren't you supposed to tell us how, exactly how to fix it? And I was like, I can do that. But you're not going to listen anyway. You're going to look at it. You're going to say, oh my gosh, you're thinking I'm going to give you like three little nuggets, make these little tweaks, it'll take you about an hour, you'll be done. In fact, no, I'm going to find some of those too, but I'm going to find the big stuff. And you're going to say, oh, and then you're going to be really scared. And then you're going to say, well, we're not going to do this right now. And then, so there's a whole like counterintuitive, like layers of counterintuitivity here, I think.
That's fair. So I was going to say, one of the things that I run across all the time. One of the things I run across all the time is that I often work on exploratory projects where my definition of exploratory is that you don't already have a solution in mind. But very often when clients come to you, they might have something already in mind, and they don't actually really want you to explore. They want you to validate their idea, which is something that you can do maybe. But one of the things that seems a bit counterintuitive that I always tell people is sometimes the best advice I can give you is not to build something or not to do something or to avoid something or to cut scope or to choose not to serve a specific type of user or support a type of browser or. And that's something that I run into all the time with clients or even other team members are like, yeah, so what should we add? And I'm like, nothing. You should subtract stuff. We should go the other way. So I'm curious, have either of you run into that scenario too? I think I know the answer, but.
Yeah, and even to the point of we want to run a usability test. No, let's not run a usability test.
Yeah,
because what are you going to do with the results? It's like really, and okay. And these days, it's kind of hard to say that, especially if you're in a consultant role and this is your bread and butter, this is how you earn your money. And there's a client that comes to you and says, "We want to do this study, or we want to do this piece of research." And you're like, "Wait a minute, why do you want to do this piece of research? What are you going to learn that's different from last time? Have you made any changes since the last time we did any research? Have your users changed significantly since last time?" If the answer to those two questions is no, then please, no, let's not. You've got budget to spend. I've got lots of ways of helping you spend that budget, but let's not do that piece you were talking about.
Well, so actually a few weeks ago, actually, someone came and said, we want to do a 20-person usability study, for a website that a nonprofit was developing, a 20-person usability study that we want to hire you, we want to pay you to do it. And I'm like, well, bigger project, thank you for, supporting a bigger project and so on. However, I think for what you want, you can get it in 10 people. And I really don't, truth be told, it gets really boring if you have an answer that you think is probably going to happen to about 10 people and you've got 10 more people to go. It's kind of painful as a researcher, but it's like, I know it seems like more is better because of course more is better. And you have the budget and that's awesome, but more is probably not better here. And if you have the budget, throw it down the road and say, okay, we'll do 10 people after we've iterated and made changes, a month down the road, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, but don't do a 20-person usability study because more is not better.
Yeah, I run into that all the time too. Sometimes it's also I heard that you do UX, and so can you do this usability test? And I'm like, sure, what are your goals? And they're like, well, we haven't built anything yet. I'm like, well, then how exactly, what exactly are you planning to usability test? And I think some of that stems from maybe just a little bit of a lack of understanding. And I don't blame other people for that. It's not up to them to know what method to choose for the right thing. But I think I tend to use that as an opportunity to help my colleagues or partners or potential clients kind of understand, and also to let them see me as a resource for, let me guide you in the right direction, even if it's not what you thought that you needed. I have pretty frequently actually ended up doing something quite different than what I was originally asked to do on pretty many projects with pretty many clients, because I was like, no, that's actually not what we need at all.
Hard to say that directly to a client. No, that's not what you need. There's kind of an art to that, isn't there, as well? Yeah.
There sure is. Yeah.
the consulting skill set. But yeah, no, I mean, it's also something, with each passing decade, it gets easier, I found, to just say no. Like starting out, it's like, okay, back in the day, being a first year, second year, and someone says, we want this. First of all, I wasn't the decision maker at the time, but okay, sure, yes. And then you do it, and you're like, well, why aren't the results, giving us what we want? And then like a decade later, we want this. Like, well, you maybe want to modify. Then another decade passes, and you're like, no, sorry, no. Like, well, why? Just no.
Well, so that may be your approach. I don't think I'm usually quite that blunt, but I think it's all in the matter of kind of how you respond to them and how you kind of can work together to figure out what does actually make sense. And I think one of the other ways that I frequently see teams kind of thinking that they need something maybe a little different than what they thought is kind of when it comes to the scope of the problem. And I don't know about either of you, but a lot of times people come to me because they're like, we know this thing is broken. And I'm like, sure, but is that really your problem? Is it actually broken? Do you know who your users are? And so there's that kind of shift of conversation too, and trying to figure out the scope and how to kind of get people valuable information, but in a way that makes sense to them. And I'll be totally honest, I have done some creative things to try to get people to see the information that they really needed to within the framework they thought that they needed something. I've done some, for instance, usability tests where we didn't have much to show, but we had conversation, or that you can be creative about that kind of stuff. So what about you, Chris? Are there other situations where you've been able to kind of shift the conversation?
Yeah, a lot of times, I mean, one of my goals is always to help improve the methods that the team themselves are using to understand who their users are. So my job is sometimes just to run a usability study, but typically it's to help a team understand who they're developing for, why they're doing that development, what their goals are, what users' goals are, help them build a better picture of who it is they're actually creating this thing for. So exactly like you said, they might say, hey, we've got this thing's broken. Usability test it and tell us what we need to fix. But which just, I mean, it's lovely that happens now, because there was a time when people didn't even know that they should be asking for that. So this is kind of the evolution of team understanding of what they should be doing. But now, to help them through that evolution, there's a set of questions that I'll ask that would be like, great, I'm glad you want to do this. Before we do that, there's some things I'll need from you, and those are, and then we can get into a whole bunch of things. And because a bunch of things which help them to then understand who their users are, what their goals are, and because I'm framing it as these are the precursors to running the usability test that you want, then we can actually start changing that conversation. And once they've actually worked out who their users are, and maybe the people who were having problems with the product weren't the people who were actually the ones they care most about, or what direction do they want to go in the future, and is this product the one that's going to take them in that direction? All these kind of questions, all these kind of business goals and user goals coming together. Often then we can change that. Oh, so now that you know all this, do you still want that usability test, or is there some other stuff we should be doing that's going to help you? Something that might be earlier in the process that isn't something that's going to be a retrospective on what you've already built, but is going to help you to build your next thing. And that kind of teaching, that kind of guiding of the team, the development team, the product team, is, I guess, where I'm heading now. And I'm not sure if that falls under the definition of counterintuitive, but it's one of those things where you're helping take the team to a place that's different from where they were to start with. And I think that's the important thing.
Well, so I would throw in at any point in the process, you can decide, you can have an impact, particularly like, as a researcher, as a consultant, at whatever. And I find, I can think of a study maybe a year or two ago where the client came and they said, and the client said, we the client are going to, our developers are going to do the, or our stakeholders are going to do the interview. We're going to do the recruiting. All we need you to do is take notes and write a report from what we learn. So the just say no part of me would say, well, did say, are you sure that's a good idea? But in truth, as a good consultant, I said, I am going to do what I can to help you. And then I did exactly what I wanted. I took notes, but when I wrote the report, I get to caveat it as much as I want, saying, well, as this was said, a caution around this would be this. And then you can insert yourself, in whatever your role at whatever point, and still have an impact, still make a difference. So it's, it's not like, well, I do my thing or it's not going to work, or I just have to convince them of my thing. It's that whatever they tell me the thing is, if I can't change it, then I go with that flow, and then I do what I can at whatever point I can. That's a good consulting motto, I think. But
yeah, we've talked a lot about consulting. How about, because I know that each of us have over the years worked in-house, and a lot of the people that ask us questions work in-house too. How about things that might seem like counterintuitive working within an organization or within a team? I was going to say, I know Chris has thoughts. There's also the general caveat that not every team is the same. Everybody knows that. But what are the things that seem counter to some of the kind of things that we think that will make UX research get done?
We fought so long and so hard to get a usability lab space of our own in one of the organizations I worked in, with its own one-way mirror and its own cameras and its own little control room with the little voice of God intercom system through from the control room to the, and that also, it's funny because I'm talking about it now like that's old school, and it is old school to an extent. And one of the things we found as soon as we'd done this, we actually had to steal a conference room from the organization two conference rooms, right, to make the lab. And then it was just years later, I think it occurred to me that actually maybe we should have kept it as a conference room and had some kind of equipment that we could have moved in and out, because then it would have made it this space that people were used to being in. Then it would have been this, it wouldn't have been this thing where we always decided to bring people into our lab because it was our expensive lab, but we could choose to go out to them. There was all these things that having a lab space meant for us that weren't necessarily good things. And so the counterintuitive learning from that was maybe it was a bad idea to have our own lab. Much as we fought long and hard for it, I think it was this trophy. It was this thing that we thought, if only we have this, then the world will be perfect and everybody will want to use us. And it was great for doing tours around. You get executives coming around and we'd switch on all the different devices and all the monitors and stuff. So there was all these blinky lights and cameras and stuff. And the executives would be all like, oh, yes, it looks very impressive. But yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah, no, I've gotten requests periodically like, oh, we'd like to, you do user research. We'd like to use your conference room or your usability lab, to conduct some research. I'm like, can't help you there.
You're welcome to come to my office, aka my extra bedroom.
Come to my basement. Lovely place. But in fact, I totally agree. I remember like building a lab, where I worked. All excited and everything with one-way glass, and the floor was insulated, the ceiling was insulated, sound was wonderful. But yeah, it definitely wasn't. It isn't worth it. It's nice for it's nice every now and again. It's nice, but you could do it. I mean, either one, you can always rent a place, which is easy enough. And with one-way glass, even if you want or not. But and you can carry around. I mean, now especially more than ever, you can carry around your lab, in a backpack. So yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
when we set this thing up, we are talking about cameras that are about this big on massive tripods, and the monitors were all cathode ray tube monitors rather than LCD monitors. I'm talking quite a long time ago, but
you know, I will point out, like, you know, I remember it. So when I started working in '94, I mean, the recording equipment was analog, you know, so no matter what, you got, you know, an analog recorder. However, there were these little LCD screens that had come out. I mean, the resolution was like probably like 320 by 240 or something. But I mean, it was horrible. But you could actually have a portable lab, and a portable lab might be like, I don't know, I'm trying to remember, like 3 feet by 3 feet by 4 feet or something. So it was possible. I mean, it was still hard, and my God, the mixer dials were, the analog mixer dials were awful to remember.
I wonder how many people listening know what we're talking about currently.
Back in the day. Yeah.
Well, okay, so Chris, that was a great example, though, of something that it seemed like was sort of a marker of success for the UX team, right? Like, we have our own lab, how wonderful. And maybe in retrospect was not the best idea. Is there anything else that either of you, either from consulting or from working in-house, that seemed like would be wins, either for your team or for you as an individual, or that are things that people commonly talk about as wins, but maybe haven't worked out so well for either of you?
Yes. I think it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about saying yes or saying no to things. And I think, again, things are a bit different now because usability, user research, user experience has all become something which is part of a team's vocabulary a little more, even if they don't really know what that means. But I remember working in an organization and being so desperate for any kind of recognition, understanding from project teams that we would test the weirdest stuff that came our way. And this is at a time when we weren't even really, well, we were a cost center, I guess, but it didn't cost very much for the team to do this. So we tested stuff that the team hadn't even set metrics for. We test stuff that that had, it didn't make any sense for us to be doing it particularly. It's just that the team thought it would be a good idea because it could check a box for them. And these days, that's the last thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to do testing for somebody just because it's part of the organization's process that it has to go through user testing, because you know that they're doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm not going to test something that the team isn't prepared to set metrics for up front. And by that, what I mean is, okay, team, what is it you're looking to get from this? And what counts as success? So, for instance, does it count as success if 5 out of 10 people can find their way through this? If 8 out of 10 people can find their way through this? Does it have to be all 10 people? What satisfaction score are you looking for from the end of this? Those kind of things. If they can't set those, if they're not prepared to set those up front, why run a study? Because ultimately, sure, there's some formative stuff you can do where if you're early in the process, you might not be collecting metrics quite the same way. But these situations are ones where if you're in that position and the team isn't prepared to do that, then there's no real point in running that study.
Yeah, I mean, did you freeze? So I've
frozen up. Yeah, I've frozen up.
Oh no, we may have lost Chris.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I also think, though, that when the team sometimes ask for studies that seem the studies themselves seem counterintuitive, why you want to do that. There's also I also think of situations where there's budgets, like, oh, we have a budget line item that says we need to cover this many usability studies. If we don't do another one or another two or another three this year, or another or research or whatever it is this year, then we're going to lose it for next year. So can we just do something? And sometimes I think that the counterintuitive nature of those extra studies is really like a yes, we all agree this may not be necessary. This may not be critical right now. This may not even make sense perfectly, but it kind of justifies either the cost or the time or the effort or having the staff available. And there's kind of, I think there's often business decisions that lead to the counterintuitive nature of having to do something when it doesn't really make sense.
And when those situations occur, I'm happy to go along with it, but I'm still going to try and make the best of it for that team. You want to spend that budget? We can find very creative ways of spending that budget. If your organization is so crazy that they won't give you money next year unless you spend money this year, I'll help you spend that money. So
Right.
sorry, everybody, for my camera dying on me. I don't know what's going on, but
Oh,
as
that's
long as
all
you can
right.
still hear me.
We can still hear you, but your face is frozen.
Yeah, that's probably for the best for the rest of the viewers and stuff.
Oh.
So.
Well, I actually, and all of this talk about sort of like business decisions has me thinking too of another sort of, I don't know if it's exactly counterintuitive, but a sort of saying that I hear a lot is that a user experience, especially a researcher, is the voice of the user, and we are always supposed to vouch for the user. And I don't actually find that to be the case, at least in my own work a lot of the time. I very often think that the very most successful UX people, whether we're in design or research or some combination, are the people who can be the translators between the different groups within a business. So not just business side, not just user side, but sort of like business and user and tech and all of the different things. And how can we translate that into not only business decisions, but also like, what does that practically mean for the people who work in a store, or the people who will be answering the phone, or the sales force, or whatever. And so it's like, I hear all the time about like, you have to do what's best for the users. And while yes, you have to keep the users in mind, an organization that has really happy users and can't keep itself afloat because it doesn't have any funding isn't much good to the users. It's just going to be disappointing when it folds. So you have to kind of be able to think about all of the, in my experience anyway, and other people value kind of that holistic approach in a way that they may not be able to sort of connect with you on or appreciate if all you're doing is talking about, well, this is what's best for the users always, ever, prioritize this always. I think it's more of a trade-off game. I know we talked about trade-offs a little bit last time I was here. This is a different sort of a trade-off, but I think it's a similar thing. It's easy to get in the mindset of users want this is what would be best for them, that's what we should do. That's not always the case.
I got to agree with you there. There's some stuff that that is a gentle balancing act between business requirements and user requirements. And to focus entirely on user requirements and be the champion for the user. No, being the champion for the user is one thing. Focusing uniquely on user requirements isn't going to get you very far in the organization. For instance, one of the best ways to convince the business is to speak in dollars rather than in user feelings. And much as we love dealing with the fact that it's the users that we care about, and we want them to be successful, and if they're having a sucky time, it's probably not good for your product. Unless we can put that into dollar terms, it's very unlikely that the organization is actually going to take us very seriously. So it's one of those other counterintuitive things. We're the people who have the touchy-feely side of things, but we still have to talk in business terms to make an impact.
And I think that touchy-feely side is what makes it useful and or effective. It makes UX people effective at being the communicator, to Amanda's point earlier, the translator, but also that what we might term UX strategy. Talking to the high ups and translating for the high ups that like who the users are, even as proxy. Certainly getting the user input for the products, making sure they're usable is one thing, but being able to also be a proxy for the users to other people, is a soft skill. And it's something I think that is a soft skill that is often hand in hand with a UX kind of personality. Somebody who is more of that kind of perhaps touchy-feely like person who likes to talk to the users, who likes to interact with people and to build stories and narratives based on those conversations.
Yeah. Okay. So for better or worse, we're all in agreement there. Users are important, but it's not the unique perspective that you should take. You should champion them, but you also need to balance the needs of the business and the technology side of things and kind of the other aspects.
Is that just us being? Is that just us being? I don't know, old hacks who are just worn down by the system, or is that us being realist, or is that us being?
Speak for yourself. I'm not old, Chris.
Oh, geez, I'm so sorry. I just insulted Amanda. Oh, she'll never forgive me.
I'm kidding. I feel like, though, even for better or worse, actually, sometimes it got me in trouble. Very, very early on in my career, I would be like, why are we not paying attention to this bigger picture? Why are we only trying to fix this little teeny interaction that is one part of thing? I think maybe some of it is also just, sort of your perspective and your background. And people tend to, people either tend to be really detail oriented or look at the big picture. And I think that there's got to be a balance. The micro interactions, of course, are important, but so is the bigger context. And I think that I don't think that it's just because I've been around for a while. I think I was always the kind of person who was like, we need to look at the bigger context of this. We need to be able to think about both these things and balance them out. I didn't really know it at the time, but I was attempting UX strategy 1 or 2 years in. I was like, hey, pay attention to this other stuff. So I don't think that it's just because we're old hacks.
I mean, I would say, that all cynicism aside, I find my UX work way more fun now than I did, in prior years, basically because I let go, and if I have the opportunity, if I meet the people in charge and I get to talk with them, wonderful. If I don't, okay. If I get to do the user research I want to do, okay. If I don't get to do the user research I want to do, okay, I'll make the best of it. But it took me a really long time to get there, and for me inside, it was very counterintuitive to go that way, to make a difference by pulling back. Like the emotional investment part of it. So and then work became more fun, and I think I could become counterintuitively an more effective user researcher by not caring quite as much about the difference I was going to make, the people I was going to talk to, the strategy I was going to fix, and by, I guess, having more fun along the way, it also makes other people perhaps feel better about the UX stuff that you say, because you can say it with a happy smiley face.
I think the politically correct way of saying what you just said is pick your battles, but you're much more honest.
Well, Cory, I have a question, because a question that I get pretty frequently is in terms of picking my battles, in terms of the kind of work that I do. Since we're all consultants, people are like, oh, well, do you work on insurance? Because that's boring. Or do you work on fill in the blank?
Insurance is boring.
I agree. I don't think it's boring at all. One of the things that I personally found counterintuitive when it came to UX work is that anything can be interesting if you are interested in it. So I have worked on, in the last 12 months, I've worked on health insurance. I've worked on fintech. I've worked on a cancer database. I've worked on a marketing research platform. None of those things are inherently things that I hang out in my free time and look at or spend a lot of time on, or are hobbies of mine. But there's always a way to find interesting problems to solve. There's always sort of interesting people you get to talk to. And so I'm curious if either of you have had any of those, because Cory, what you were really talking about was sort of like personal battle picking, right? Like, in order to make my life better, I'm going to choose how invested I get or how much I care about things. And so I've also kind of found that I did that. And to be clear, I also very much prioritize working on projects that I feel good about, that I think actually help people, that I think are more important. I'm not personally quite so passionate about, say, e-commerce. But then again, I've worked on an e-commerce platform that helped a lot of small business owners. And that I found really interesting, because I was talking to all these entrepreneurs, and I was talking to all these people, a lot of them actually who had lost jobs and were building their own new life. And so I have found my sort of version of picking battles is that I can be interested in almost anything, and have a really interesting outlook. And I think the other thing that maybe is a little bit counterintuitive is that you don't have to know a lot about the thing that you're going to be researching. So another project I worked on recently, and I probably will even mess up describing it, for lack of a better term, it's a tool for developers to work on data flows and data developers and data engineers. Not something I had any idea about before I started. Still not sure that I even describe it correctly, but I know that I helped them. And I know that I had a great time while I was doing it. And yeah, so I'm just curious if either of you have had any of those kind of counterintuitive, maybe not necessarily specific to like impacting the team in terms of like getting results, but just in yourself and sort of like career trajectory or pivoting.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of both examples. I mean, so the time when they aligned, I mean, like I'm personally very interested in disaster response and emergency response and things like that. And then I was doing that as a volunteer before, and then all of a sudden I got this project, and the project was all about emergency response. I was in heaven. Like it was like the alignment of my passion with the project, and I ended up, this project lasted for 6 years, and that was amazing. Like it was amazing. So I will not say that it doesn't mean anything, but that said, I totally agree. I mean, most of my projects did not have that perfect alignment, and really, it just I like to learn stuff. So I'm like, okay, it's an opportunity to learn about whatever. And I love it. I love like just, learning about these random things, being able to impress people later with the trivia that you like learn in the field from whatever knowledge base, you have, whether it's like the rotation of farm equipment or whatever, it's really fun. So totally, like I support the counterintuitive value of being able to say wherever I'm going to land, whatever topic, whatever job I have. One, you find value in the methods that you do, but two, you just learn all these different things, and I can't say that I've necessarily developed any new passion from various topics. I'm not like, oh wow, now that I know about this, I'm super excited. But I find joy in the uniqueness, and actually I think keeping me on my toes is what keeps me from like just getting bored with life. I mean, I say that about travel too. If I keep traveling, it keeps me on my toes in new places, figuring it out. If I'm doing new topics, it keeps me on my toes in new places, in new topics, figuring it out. And it's all the same. It's I got to keep like struggling to figure something out to keep enjoying not only work but life too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's part of that for me is is similar to what you're saying. You're saying about meaty topics. Counterintuitively, you'd think that one of the things you'd want to do in work is like cruise through it and just not have too much hassle and just kind of get done. And I think that maybe that's more of a corporate mindset than a consultant mindset. I wouldn't be doing this job if I wanted to just cruise. But the thing that excites me about projects is meaty problems, stuff which is going to be hard to resolve. And it's going to mean thinking carefully about what kind of research methods we're going to use, who we're going to recruit, how we're going to actually get information from those people, how we're going to present that information. Those kind of things are what makes it much more fun. Doing that for a topic area that's one I've never heard of before is equally interesting. And I'm along the same lines as you guys. It's like, Amanda, what you were saying about insurance, and some people saying, oh, how can you work in insurance? It's so boring. I've had some of my best interactions with insurance teams. And sure, I mean, selling annuities or something isn't necessarily the most fun-filled thing in the world. But the problems that the team who are selling annuities might have are interesting. The financial space, I had some really interesting conversations with and research opportunities with teams who are trying to encourage people to become financially responsible. This is in a banking organization. They realize that it actually helps to have better customers in the future if you make them financially responsible up front. Surprise, surprise, right?
Surprise!
But how do you do that? And it goes back to a lot of the sort of the behavioral changes that you can make. But making behavioral changes through software, not the easiest thing. So a lovely meaty problem. How do you test those behavioral changes? Because they take place over a period of time. Not the easiest thing to test. But again, really, really rewarding when you actually find, oh, look, we got this data and it does show these changes. And wow, we're making these, we're pushing people in the right direction or pulling them in the right direction. So yeah, all those things are what keep me going in this job. And it is all counterintuitive to an extent, because part of me just wants that easy life. Part of me is like, I'll just phone in this next usability study. It'll be super easy. But to be honest, that wouldn't actually make me happy. So that's not what I do with my job.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. There's one other thing that I kind of wanted to bring up when we were talking about counterintuitiveness, which is one of the things that often also comes up, especially in UX research, is that, and Chris, I think you mentioned this a little bit, but you're often criticizing people or telling them that what they've already built doesn't work, or that kind of thing. And one of the things that I have personally kind of striven for is that everybody doesn't have to like you as the UX person, but they do have to respect you. And those are really different things. Those are really different things, and everybody has kind of a different way of going about that. But I think a lot of times I hear people talking about, I have to be nice, everybody has to like me. And there's a lot of nuances to that, and a lot of other conversation that goes with that. But I know something for me that I have sort of kind of come to see over time is that sometimes the people who respect you don't like you very much, but they'll still, if they respect you and your opinions, sometimes they can be your biggest champion. And sometimes I have found people who I actually did not think liked me very much were the ones who ended up vouching for me in the tough conversations, because they may not have liked always what I was saying, but they knew that I was coming from a place of trying to make everybody better. And I was always respectful about how I did it too. And so maybe we should have a whole other conversation about how you handle providing constructive criticism to teammates. But I was curious about either of your sort of interactions with that. I've heard a lot of especially younger or like newer UX people talking about that kind of like, how do I get people to pay attention? How do I get them to like me kind of feeling, which I think is a little bit misguided.
Well, so I remember it was my senior year of college, and I took this class that I totally disagreed with the professor. And I wrote a paper, and at my final paper, I basically slammed the entire class. But I tried to do it gently, and the professor said, you because you criticize with much gentleness. And I realized, that I did. Wow, huh? But I mean, I totally slammed the professor. I'm like, no, everything you said is wrong. But apparently, like I think that's been kind of my guiding philosophy is I don't want people to dislike me because of my advice and my guidance. And I'd rather kind of couch it and frame it and work really hard to not be disliked for what I say. And kind of I feel like that spoonful of sugar helps a lot in making progress. And yeah, I'd rather criticize with much gentleness, and be on friendly terms with everybody, if I can.
I think what Amanda said about respect versus being liked is important. It's kind of easier for us to say that. I mean, look at us. The three of us are all people who are kind of at a point in our careers where we've got history. And that history is something that can kind of, other people can look at and they can say, oh, yeah, you've done some stuff. You're probably worth listening to. It might be harder. Amanda's like, what? No, your point though, Amanda, about new people, I want everybody to like me. No. I think what I'd say there is, if you want people to listen to you, if you want people to respect you, speak from data, not from opinion. And this kind of goes back to what Cory was saying about criticizing gently. It's like you can be a complete idiot about how you criticize. And there's different forms of criticism. And I mean, for instance, if you start attacking the person who you're talking with, that's not going to go down very well. If instead you can start talking from a point of data rather than opinion, bringing user data, research data to the table and saying, there's a reason I disagree with you, and it's this reason, this data suggests something different. That's the way to gain respect, because it's never about the person, it's about users. It's never about the product, it's about users. So in those situations, I'd say, rather than trying to be nice, just be honest, but working from the data, and keep it away from the individual and how dumb they are and how bad of a coder they are and how the product would be so much better if this product manager wasn't actually in charge of it or whatever.
Well, yeah, and that never really goes over super well.
No, it doesn't.
Well, and actually what it sounds like you're saying, Chris, kind of is that you should tell a story with the data, which is interesting, yes. Because next week we're going to be talking about stories and storytelling, because it is already that time. We've reached our maximum capacity here for this hour, but next week you can join us at the same time, 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern, next Thursday, and we'll talk about stories. So we're going to talk about sort of what's the best way to get messages across from each of our experience. So if you have any questions on that topic or things you want us to follow up on from this time, again, you can comment on this stream or to any one of us on LinkedIn. You can and you can tag Sticky Notes Chat and we will respond. You can send us an email, chat@stickynotes.chat, or you can tweet at us at StickyNotesChat, or just generally scour the internet for the three of us. We're pretty easy to find. You can go to our website, stickynotes.chat. You can see past episodes and email to see what we've got coming up. And again, you can reach out to any of us at any time for requests or with other questions, or if there's topics that you'd like us to cover. So with that, thanks, Chris and Cory. We'll see y'all next week.